As you know, the global trade growth is slowing down, and then the region is also feeling the pinch. As you can see from the chart over the right-hand side of the slide, the Asia's trade growth slowed down even further, the economic growth. So the gap between the trade growth and the economic growth has widened in 2015. Then there are several cyclical as well as structural factors behind this phenomenon. Firstly, the global economic recovery should be the main culprit, but there are other structural factors. As you know, China's PRC's growth moderation is driving the transition of the economy from the export and investment orientation into more based on the consumption and the services. And also the country is going through a quite fast structural transformation. The PRC is moving up the value chain with the technological development. Given the quite significant portion of the China in Asia's total trade, actually the PRC's share out of Asia total global trade is around 49.5%, around half of the Asia total trade is accounted for by the China. So given this high weight, the PRC's structural transformation has quite significant impact on Asia trade growth. This factor is also closely related to the next point of the slowdown in the expansion of the global value chain. Also, last point is the increasing use of non-tariff measures. Non-tariff measures including the trade remedies such as anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties, and safeguards, and also the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and also technical barriers trade and the tariff quota rate has increased over time in the region in terms of both number and scope. Central Asia's exports and imports are increasingly directed toward Asia. As you can see from this chart, the Central Asia's trade going to Asia has increased over time, in particular to China. So China accounts for a significant portion of the trade for Central Asia. In terms of the intra-sub-regional trade, Central Asia, which is represented by the gray line of the chart, has increased over time. Sub-regional, at the sub-regional intra-regional trade share out of the Central Asia total trade has increased a bit, but Central Asia's inter-sub-regional trade has declined in the past couple of years, in particular in 2015. As you can see from the right-hand side chart, the Central Asia inter-sub-regional trade, which means Central Asia trade with other sub-regions, including East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, has declined recently. So global value chain appears to be maturing. The global value chain has expanded quite rapidly over the past decades, but recently it seems to be maturing or stagnating. Based on the validated decomposition of the gross export data of the ADB's multi-regional input-output table, we try to estimate the GVC global value chain participation rate, calculating the share of the validated exports using domestically or foreign produced intermediates. Based on this estimation, the global GVC participation rate increased between 2000 and 2011, as you can see from the chart in the above, but the global value chain participation rate declined between 2011 to 2015. And Asia is no exception. In the case of Asia as well, the global value chain has shrank between 2011 and 2015 based on our calculation of the GVC participation rate. So stop number of the non-tariff measures imposed against the developing Asia is also increasing, mainly centered on the sanitary and phytosanitary measures and then also the technical barriers on trade. But also there are increasing number of trade remedies such as anti-dumping duties, which is represented by the purple area of the bar chart, anti-dumping duties also, and also the special safeguards has increased over time. Anti-dumping duties and the countervailing duties and safeguards, although these are the legitimate trade policy tools as a trade remedies, but it can be at the same time used as quite strong protectionist measures. Further, we try to test how much positive or negative impact is being incurred by the non-tariff measures to the exports by the region. And we have focused on the impact of SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, how much the global trade is being affected by these non-tariff measures. As you can see from this regression result, estimation result, we have looked at three different country groupings of the OECD countries, and then the developing Asia, and finally non-OECD, non-developing Asia, developing countries, three country groups. And then this first coefficient of the negative 0.03 coefficient indicates how much OECD country exports are affected by the SPS measures imposed by importing countries. As you can see from this result, the impact is not significant, but slightly negative impact is being incurred. But when it comes to the developing Asia's exports are quite significantly negatively affected by the SPS measures imposed by the importing countries. Moving on to the agricultural sector only, when we look at only the agricultural sector, even OECD countries' exports are quite negatively affected by the SPS imposition by importing countries. Further, developing Asia's exports in the agricultural sector is very much negatively affected by the SPS measures. This means that the non-tariff measures in the region and outside the region is forging quite a significant negative impact on the export from Asia. Although trade growth is slowing down, one bright side of the trade is that still the Asian economies' inter-regional trade bias remains quite strong. Based on our dynamic gravity model estimation, the Asian economies are engaging in trade with regional counterparts around twice what they are engaging in trade with outside the region. So inter-regional trade bias is estimated around twice. But on the other hand, when we look at the sub-regional level, trade linkages within sub-regions remain strong, but inter-sub-regional trade linkages have become weaker. We have observed the same phenomenon from the Central Asian case, right? Within the sub-region, within Central Asia, the trade linkage has become stronger, but the inter-sub-regional linkages, Central Asia is trading with East Asia or other sub-regions in Asia have become weaker over time. So this indicates more efforts should be made to improve connectivity and trade facilitation across different sub-regions beyond the sub-regional level. So moving on to the financial integration, Asia outward investments are growing as reflected in the increasing cross-border access by Asian residents. In fact, annual growth rate of the total asset holdings by Asian residents was 5.4%. Intra-Asian asset holdings grew even faster at 11.8%. This indicates the gradual progress of regional financial integration, although the degree of the financial integration lags far behind the trade integration, but still there is some gradual progress happening in the region. The same observation can be found when we look at the cross-border liabilities. Liabilities means the residents in the region are borrowing from outside or inside of the region, and the annual growth of the total Asia's cross-border liabilities was 6.4% from 2010 to 2011, but the further the intra-regional cross-border liabilities grew even faster at 8.3%. Again, this also points to the gradual progress of financial integration in the region. The first two charts on the left-hand side indicates how much Asian residents are making investments outside the region, outflows, and the right-hand side chart are about both debt and the portfolio, investment inflows into the region. So as you can see by comparing these two charts, the Asian residents are making more outward investment, and the inflows into the region has dwindled recently. In terms of debt equity investment, in the chart in the above of the left-hand side of the slide, the equity investment to rest of the world, excluding US and EU, have increased quite significantly in 2015. The rest of the world includes the Cayman Island and Bermuda, so there could be some tax-related incentives there. In terms of debt investment, as you can see from the bottom chart of the left-hand side slide, the Asian resident debt investment mostly went to US, while the Asia's bond investment into EU declined in 2015. This might be due to some Greek debt crisis last year in Euro area, and also widening yield gap between the Euro bond and the US bond. In terms of the financial inflows into Central Asia, as you can see from the three chart, debt investment have all declined over time recently. On the other hand, the bank claims, I mean the borrowings of the Central Asian resident from outside the Central Asia have increased over time in 2014 and 2015. The source of, the decline of the debt investment into the region was mainly due to the decline in the equity investment from EU area, but the US investment actually increased in 2015. That investment was quite positive for Azerbaijan and Armenia and Uzbekistan, and also equity investment increased to the Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan in 2015. But the EU's debt investment and the equity investment into Kazakhstan declined quite significantly in 2015. This chart shows some so-called dynamic conditional correlation between the price movement of the financial products in the region and outside of the region. As you can see from the chart, Asia's debt prices are more correlated with the movement of the US in the bottom chart of the slide. But on the other hand, Asia equity prices are more related to the rest of the world. So Asia's the bond prices are moving along with the movement of the US bond prices, but Asia's equity prices are not that much correlated with the US or EU equity price, but it's more correlated with the rest of the world equity markets. For example, the Luxembourg, not Luxembourg, but the non-EU, non-EU and the non-US, the rest of the world countries are exerting significant influence on the price movement of the Asian equity markets. So moving on to the people mobility, movement of people. As for the recipients, the three countries of India, China, and Philippines rank the top three countries in terms of the absolute value of remittances into the country. But in terms of the share out of GDP, percentage as of GDP, three countries, Nepal, Kazakhstan from Central Asia, and the Tonga rank the top three countries in the region in Asia. In the case of the Nepal, the remittance ratio out of total GDP is about 32%. In the case of Kazakhstan, the remittance ratio out of total GDP in 2015 was 29%, quite a high number. When it comes to the tourism receipts, as you can see from the right-hand side chart of the slide, as you may know, actually the tourism receipts even greater financial resources for Asia than the remittances. The absolute amount of the tourism receipts are even larger than the remittances as a whole into the region. For the tourism receipts, three small island countries of Maldives, Palau, and Vanuatu There, the tourism receipts share out of GDP is the highest, top three, at the top three in the entire Asia. In the case of Maldives, for example, their tourism receipts ratio out of GDP in 2014 was 86%. So the Maldives economy is pretty much dependent upon the tourism receipts as the main source of the financial resources. Although tourism receipts are stable and resilient to the economic shocks, these countries still face the challenges of the economic diversification, as you might imagine. The sub-regional initiatives, as my colleague, Mr. Giovanni Capanelli, has elaborated a little bit on the various sub-regional level initiatives during his overview. So basically, across the sub-regions, we are supporting, ADB supporting the 5 sub-regional initiatives. The KARM is the Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation, focusing on the further progress in the ERCI in Central Asia. And as you know, the GMS Greater Mekong Sub-Regional Initiatives is focused on the Southeast Asia, ASEAN 10 countries, right? And East Asia, although the East Asia, there is no unique or the standalone sub-regional initiatives. The China and the Mongolia are important part of both GMS and KARM, as you know. In the SASEC, there is some quite flourishing sub-regional integration initiatives, so-called SASEC. And in the Pacific, we also have some sub-regional level cooperation initiatives. Common features of the sub-regional initiatives across different sub-regional level are the transport and trade facilitation, and the energy power generation distribution, and the economic corridor development. I know that the transport corridor, the transforming transport corridor into the economic corridor is quite moving steady in the Central Asia, centered on the KARM initiatives. And in some of the sub-regions, there are some quite sizable progress in terms of ICT, human capital development, and climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts. In particular, for the KARM initiatives, recently we have seen quite prominent progress made in the region. One example is the decline in the time taken to cross borders. According to ADB's estimates, the average time taken to clear a border crossing point along the correct transport corridors was reduced to 13.1 hours in 2015 from 14.1 hours in 2014. So in addition, the drop in the travel time by rail was quite high, from 32.6 hours to 27.4 hours in 2015. So we are observing quite significant progress made in terms of trade facilitation, transportation, and border crossing and transit. So let me try to summarize the key message of the AEIR chapter of our report. First, trade growth has decelerated even faster in Asia, but as I have tried to highlight, inter-regional trade linkage remains still quite strong. The Asian countries are engaging in trade quite significantly with the regional counterparts than the outside the region. Non-trade barriers such as SPS and TBT and trade remedies appear to exert a negative impact on trade. In this sense, policymakers in the region need to make more efforts to lower the non-tariff barriers. Not only lowering the non-tariff barriers, but also we need to pay more attention to provide the capacity building and the technical assistance to the exports of the developing countries. Because the non-tariff measures, although many of them are legitimate trade policy tools, it can cause quite significant compliance costs to the exporters, right? In that sense, we need to provide more capacity building to the exports to reduce their compliance costs. So this is another area that we can work together in the context of regional cooperation in the region. Trade linkages within the sub-region still remain strong, but the inter-sub-regional trade linkages have weakened over time, as I have mentioned before. So there is some more efforts to be made, to improve the connectivity and trade facilitation across different sub-regions, again beyond the sub-regional level. The greater and more concerted efforts to push for freer trade regimes against the growing protectionism should be made. we have seen a lot of the anti-globalization and the protectionism growing around the globe in the context of Brexit referendum and also in the run-up to the US election. But the region should make a collective action to guard against the rising protectionism. Inter-regional asset holdings remain still low. Although the financial integration has progressed gradually, but still far lags behind the trade integration. The strengthening market, institution infrastructure, and harmonizing policies can foster regional financial integration, we believe. Lastly, remittances are quite important and stable sources for some of the regional economies, but at the same time, these countries need to make more efforts to make efficient use of these very important financial resources. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.